Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. First thing that you'll notice, I'm not in my usual location today. I'm not in front of my bookshelves. There's a couple of different reasons for that. First reason is I'm in the process of kind of reorganizing. I actually plan on doing the real reorganization piece on camera and making a video out of that, but I'm like going through deciding what I'm gonna unhaul, all those types of things. And also I'm in the middle of doing like Christmas decorating. Like I'm in the middle of that right now. Like my house is an absolute disaster. So I have like the tree already in front of the shelves and everything is kind of jacked up. So I was like, you know what? We're just gonna change locations. We're gonna chill out on the couch. We're just gonna do the thing because it's just gonna be easier. That's also why my lighting is also not great because a couple of my lights are out up here and they're stuck. And I just don't have the mental fortitude right now to like deal with my ring light and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit different. So forewarning, this is gonna be a long one. And the reason it's gonna be long is because I read 18 books in November. Part of the reason for that is you guys may or may not know this. You know, if you talk to me regularly, I have had back issues for the past several months now, and so I've seen an orthopedist and I'm doing physical therapy, but my orthopedist had me do like 10 days on steroids, and I could not stay still whenever I was on steroids. Like I could not stay still. So like I cleaned my whole house. It was great. While I was doing that, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. So I actually have several of those on this list that I got from my library. So if it hadn't been for that, I probably wouldn't, it would have been like probably somewhere around 12 books. So let's do like stats and all that kind of stuff, which I have to put my glasses on for because that's all on my computer screen, which is back behind here. And I don't have my contacts in. And your girl is blind. So, but the reason that I took them off is because you can see the glare. It's not cute. Okay, so as I previously said, 18 books in November, which is pretty amazing. Of those 18 books, that was 4,158 pages. And then audio hours, it was 54.5 audio hours. However, I listen at 2 times speed. So if you cut that in half, that's, I don't know, 25, 27-ish. In that general vicinity. Star breakdown. This was a really, really good month. I haven't had a month with this many 5-star reads in a long time. So I had 5 5-star reads, 7 4-star reads, and 6 3-star reads, and 0 2 or 1-star reads. So that's amazing. Formatting, I had 12 physical copies, 0 ebooks, and 6 audiobooks. All 6 audiobooks were from my library. 15 adult books, 3 young adult books, 5 male authors, 12 female authors, and 1 a mixture of both because it was an anthology. And as far as genre goes, there were 4 horror, 1 thriller, thriller mystery, 4 contemporary, 7 nonfiction, and 2 fantasy. So it's kind of all over the board. Let's jump right in because I've already been talking for too long and we got a lot of books to go through. But I did do a poll on both Twitter and on YouTube to see if you guys wanted 1 long video or 2 shorter ones. And long video went out on both platforms by a pretty big margin. So hopefully you guys are gonna be into this long ass wrap up. So anyway, all right. Okay, now that we're done with the stats and I don't need to read anymore, we're gonna take off my glasses so that I don't have that terrible glare on my face. Jumping right into the books. First book that I finished this month, which actually was technically part of October because I did finish it in October, like the very last day. But at that point, I had already filmed my wrap up and I was like, I'm not gonna go back through and refilm it for 1 book. So we're just gonna add it on to November. So the book was A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. I did get this one for my library via audio. Rated it 4 stars, really, really liked it. And this was actually my first experience with Paul Tremblay. And I was very much impressed. So basically this is a story that follows a family and it's told from the perspective of the younger sibling. So the older daughter seems to be possessed by a demon, right? And the story itself kind of follows what that whole journey looks like for them. And it's told in varying timelines. So you have the timeline of when she's kind of like doing flashbacks. You have the conversations that she's having like during an interview, and then it's told from like this blog. Because apparently during that ordeal, they decided to make a reality show out of their ordeal, right? So things that I loved. I did a video not long ago. I will link it up above for those of you that are interested in watching it, about like why I read horror. And one of the things that I talked about was how there's a lot of emotion attached in horror that people don't seem to realize. And this was one of those books that really, to me, really packed that emotional punch. The way that it ended, I will not say anything about the way that it ended, but it definitely fucked me up a little bit. I really enjoyed the family dynamic that was exhibited through this book. I felt like the relationship that they showed between the younger and older sister, it felt very real to me. It felt very accurate. And again, this is one of those books that has the traditional horror elements like right up the front, but there's also a lot more of a deep meaning, you know, really behind a lot of those things. And I really, really loved that. Really loved the writing. I thought that the pacing was really good. The only thing that really took off the star for me was some of those varying like POV / timeline things. I just didn't really love that aspect of it at times, but the story as a whole, I really, really loved. I 100% recommend it. So next book on the list is Paperbacks from Hell. This is by Grady Hendrix, and this is my first nonfiction pick for the month. So basically what this is this is just exactly what it says, the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror fiction. So things that I loved most about this are definitely the formatting. It is beautiful, full color pages, has a bunch of covers. Some of the covers take up full pages, and I found so many titles in this that I really want to find. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones that are in here are out of print at this point. So I'm definitely gonna be scouring some used bookstores to try and find this, but I found this absolutely fascinating. And Grady Hendrix as a writer, if you haven't read any of his fiction, you should, because he's excellent. But even his nonfiction, like, I found myself actually laughing out loud at certain points during this. So really well written, really, really interesting, even though it's nonfiction. So if you're a fan of horror at all and you haven't picked this up, you really should, because there's a lot of good information. You can find a lot of titles that you might not have heard of, and just really a lot of information about like horror as a genre and like its development through the 70s and the 80s, and I just really loved that. So definitely highly recommend this one, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. So after I read that one, I still am in nonfiction kick, so I was going through titles that were available to check out via audio from my library, and Thunderstruck by Eric Larson was on there. So Thunderstruck is about, I can't even remember his name. Basically, it's about the guy, Marconi, that's his name. It's basically about this man. His last name is Marconi, and he is the person that really was trying to like perfect wireless transmission across the Atlantic, right? Meanwhile, there's a second story going on about this man whose name I also can't remember, who very probably killed his wife somewhere in the UK. It is very similar in its styling as Devil in the White City, which if you haven't read is absolutely excellent. It tells the alternating story of the architect who worked on the Chicago World's Fair in the early 1900s, and H.H. Holmes, who was recognized as one of America's first serial killers. Absolutely fascinating story, reads a lot like fiction. Really loved that book. This one, not so much. I was finding myself skipping through parts where they're talking about like the wireless transmissions, because it got very technical at times and I just was not into that. So unfortunately, I ended up rating it 3 stars. Again, I didn't love it. If you're interested in like technological pieces like that, then I would say pick it up. The murder aspect of it, which is really the reason that I picked it up to begin with, wasn't compelling enough for me to really love this book. So the cat's snoring. I don't think that you can hear him on camera, but he's snoring. So right after that, once again, another audiobook from my library. I picked up the Romanoff sisters, and I cannot recall the author's name. Helen Rappaport, maybe. I believe that's what it is. And again, gave this one 3 stars. I am not super familiar with the Romanoff family in general. I know very, very basic stuff. This was more geared towards the Romanoff sisters themselves versus what happened with Rasputin and really like the fall of that family. So it really started out talking about how their mother and father met, why they got married, all of those types of things, and then, you know, going on from the daughter's birth till right up before the revolution. It was interesting. It was well written. If this is an era in history that you were interested in, I would recommend picking it up. There were parts where it kind of dragged, and I think that me personally, I'm a little bit more interested in the Rasputin piece of it. So if you guys have any recommendations as far as like nonfiction or even fictionalized works dealing with the Romanovs and Rasputin, like leave that down below because I would be really interested in that. I gave it 3 stars. I definitely didn't hate it, but you know, again, as nonfiction goes, it wasn't as compelling to me as certain nonfiction has been, so, but it wasn't bad. So next, still on a nonfiction kick, I decided to look on my own shelves to see what nonfiction I had, and I remembered I had The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. This book is so good. 5 stars, hands down. One of the best nonfiction works that I've ever read. Like, absolutely loved this book. So Jeanette Walls is apparently a journalist, but this is her memoir from growing up in a poor family and really just what her life looked like. And it was so good. It was so good. I hate that I'm one of those people that whenever like a book is just okay, I can articulate my thoughts really well, but like when I love a book as much as I love this one, I just want to, I loved it. I just want to say that over and over again. This book read like fiction. And I think that's one of the reasons that I loved it so much, but also having that realization every so often, like, oh my God, this was actually her life. Like this is the kind of thing that she dealt with. You know, a father that was kind of like in and out of the picture. He was incredibly smart, but he was also a drunk. A mother who kind of dealt with that abusive relationship, but also to a point didn't really seem like she wanted to be a mom from the beginning. You know, she was an artist and wanted to focus on her art. And then you have the kids who end up just trying to figure out how to take care of themselves. And that whole like journey was just so good and so riveting. And I haven't read that many memoirs. Like, I'll be honest, I have not read that many memoirs, but this is hands down like one of the best memoirs I've ever read. The other best memoir that I've ever read is also on this list or in this wrap up. So you'll see that in a few minutes, but so good. You should read it. 5 stars. So now we have another nonfiction book from a library. This is The I-5 Killer by Anne Rule. She is the same writer who wrote The Killer Beside Me, The Green River Killer. She does serial killer books. That's cool. I like that kind of stuff. So picked this one up since it was available from my library via audiobook. 3 stars. Wasn't anything that I super loved. I think I enjoyed The Killer Beside Me. Or Stranger Beside Me, I'm sorry. The Stranger Beside Me more than this one, and I was not familiar at all with the I-5 Killer himself. So one of the things that Anne Rule does a lot of is she puts a heavy focus on the actual crimes that they committed and talks about some of those in a lot of detail. So this particular killer, there was a lot of sex crimes that were associated with that. If that is something that bothers you, I don't recommend reading this because it does get, it's hard to get through at points. The ending was one of the most interesting parts to me after he is caught. He doesn't seem like a very smart guy at the beginning, but he's actually like master manipulator in a lot of senses. So that piece of it was really interesting, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was, you know, a solid true crime kind of book. So if you like true crime and you're not squeamish about going into detail about those certain crimes, then, you know, I would say pick it up. So right after I got done with A Head Full of Ghosts, I immediately put on hold Cabin at the End of the World, also by Paul Tremblay. So after I had finished the I-5 Killer, that finally came in from the library, listened to it via audio. This is another 4-star read. So this is about a young girl and her 2 dads who are at this remote cabin by a lake, you know, just really trying to veg out, be on vacation, spend some time together, that kind of thing. And this dude comes up to the house and he's like, listen, child knows that she's not supposed to talk to strangers, but she does anyway. And he starts telling her, so listen, we're gonna come knock on your door in a few minutes. She can hear other people coming, and that you guys have to let us in. You're not gonna wanna let us in, but you have to let us in. You need to convince your dads to let us in because you have to help us prevent the end of the world. That's all I'm gonna tell you. This is one of those books that takes place in like one centralized location, and those, to me, if they're done in the wrong way, are really, really boring. I really enjoyed this one, and the ending struck me in a very similar way that the ending to A Head Full of Ghosts did. There's a lot of like deeper meaning, and it seems to me that with Cabin at the End of the World especially, that you either love it or you hate it. And it's all based on the ending. I actually saw a tweet, and I don't remember who tweeted it, and it said, you can tell a lot about a person by how they react to the end of Paul Tremblay's books. I think there's a lot of truth in that just because of the way that he writes. But again, the family dynamic that was in that book, it felt very real. Again, I don't want to say like too much about like actual plot just because I think that it's better that you just go into it not knowing a whole lot, because I didn't, and I feel like I enjoyed it more because of that. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy the writing. I have one more book by him actually on my shelves, is Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and I'm really looking forward to reading that. And we're back to nonfiction, and the next nonfiction that I read is Red Azalea. This is by Angie Min. I have read several of her books, and I first discovered her as an author from my non-Western lit class where we read Wild Ginger, and I really loved that. So every time I've been at a used bookstore, I look for her books. I didn't realize whenever I purchased this the last time that I went to Second and Charles that this was actually her memoir. And I didn't realize it obviously until I started it. This is another memoir that absolutely floored me. 5 stars. Oh my God. Like, again, I had to continually remind myself that this wasn't fictional, that she actually lived this. Like, this was her life. I'm honestly just going to read you the back synopsis of this book because that will give you a better idea of what it's about, way better than I can explain it. Red Azalea is Angie Min's celebrated memoir of growing up in the last years of Mao's China. As a child, she was asked to publicly humiliate a teacher. At 17, she was sent to work at a labor collective. Forbidden to speak, dress, read, write, or love as she pleased, she found a lifeline in a secret love affair with another woman. Miraculously selected for the film version of one of Madame Mao's political operas, Min's life changed overnight. Then Chairman Mao suddenly died, taking with him an entire world. It was just so good. So good. I cannot articulate to you how much I loved this book. The only thing, I did rate it 5 stars. The only thing is the formatting in this is a little weird because there's no true chapters. There's just like page breaks. And as far as dialogue, because it's a memoir, there's no punctuation, like no quotation marks or anything with that dialogue. And that makes it a little bit hard to like realize who's talking at times. But other than that, like, I absolutely loved this. And this is one of those things, after reading, I ended up doing a lot of research on Maoist China, and I do have, I think, 2 or 3 more books of hers that I do need to read. But absolutely loved this. If you're looking for a good memoir, if you're a really big fan of them and you haven't picked this up, you really should because it's so good. Next book that I picked up is one that I own, and it is The Leavers by Lisa Ko. And I honestly hadn't heard much about this until I picked it up. And this is a book about a boy, Deming, who lived with his mother, Polly, who was an undocumented Chinese immigrant. They are living in New York, I believe. Yes, they're living in New York. One day she's talking about moving to Florida. Deming says, no, I don't want to do that. They kind of have a fight about it. The next day, she vanishes without a trace. Nobody knows where she is. And so Deming ends up in foster care and then is adopted by a family. This book I liked for a lot of different reasons. It is a book that really discusses like cultural identity, you know, because he's adopted from a family that specifically wanted to adopt, you know, a child from China. You know, you're growing up in America and speaking Fujianese, you know, and meanwhile, he never really understands what happened to his mom. She just disappeared. Well, as the story goes on, we eventually do find out what happened to Polly and the way that all of that kind of comes together. It's definitely a book that makes you think about a lot of things. I enjoyed the writing. I thought that the pacing was good. It did drag at a couple of different points, and there were a couple of extraneous things as far as Deming's character that I felt like didn't necessarily add anything to the story. I felt like they were just kind of used as like plot devices. But aside from that, I did really enjoy the book as a whole. Gave it 4 stars. If you're looking for a good contemporary read, then I would say pick this up. It's really good. Next book is Firestarter by Stephen King. Not going to speak very much on this one just because we know that this is going to get its own video. I gave this one 4 stars. I think that this is really where King is starting to hit his stride as far as bringing together both character development and a very compelling plot. This is a story that is not a horror. It's definitely a thriller, but it keeps going from the very beginning, which some of his books have a tendency to meander. But again, that character development piece in this was really, really good. I gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it. You can hear more about it whenever I post the video for the King Chronicles on this one. Next up is a short story collection. This is The Dark Dark by Samantha Hunt. This I gave 3 stars. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. So this is horror fiction written by a woman. There are a lot of themes in this book that deal with like being a woman and dealing with infertility and trying to get pregnant and things of that nature. And some of it was very overt and some of it was, you know, a little bit more hidden. I did enjoy one of the things that this book did was it came full circle. The very first story in the book and the very last story in the book are about the same characters, so that was really interesting. Like I said, I didn't love this or I didn't hate it. I'm probably going to end up unhauling it because I just don't see myself rereading it. But if you're looking for some short fiction, especially from a woman horror writer, then I would recommend picking this up. I did enjoy her writing style and I do want to read other work by her. So next is another nonfiction, and it is Dear Ijuwale by, which is, it's a very long title. It's Feminist Manifesto in 15 Steps or something like that. By Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Got this one from my library, listened to it on audio. It was like an hour and a half. Super quick to get through. Gave it 5 stars just simply because there's a lot of basic information, but I don't feel like it was anything groundbreaking at the same time. So if you are looking for more information as far as feminism is concerned, or just, you know, want to read a little bit more about it, and you haven't up until this point, then I would recommend picking that up because, again, it is very basic information. If it's something that you are already very familiar with, I wouldn't necessarily say skip it, but yeah. So next, I picked up American Marriage. This is by Tayari Jones. Got this one from Book of the Month, and I had heard very positive things about it. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and it started out to me a little bit inconsistently. The last half of the book I thought was better than the first half of the book. But basically what this is an African-American couple who haven't been married for very long. They're really just starting to build a life together. And one day while they are visiting his family and they're staying at a hotel, he is wrongly arrested for a crime that he did not commit and goes to jail for a sentence of 12 to 15 years, I believe it is. And so the very beginning of the story is told in letter format, going back and forth between this husband and wife and, you know, what their life looks like outside of this and you know, what their relationship looks like during this time period. And I did very much enjoy that. You want to talk about toxic masculinity? There is a lot of that in this book. And there were times where it was just like so overt. It was like, oh God, that's crazy. There's a lot of deep stuff and it is very well written. The second half I thought is better than the first, just because the first is setting it all up and really setting up their relationship, and then the second half, when things actually start happening and there's things that are, you know, actually starting to push the plot, I feel like it gets a little bit stronger and it kind of comes into its own. I'm probably going to unhaul this, not because I didn't like it, but just because I don't see myself rereading it. I don't think that this is a book as a white person that was written for me. I did get a lot out of it, but again, I want to pass this on to somebody else who can also appreciate it. So I'll probably actually end up donating this to my library rather than selling it back. But as far as a book as a whole goes, 4 stars, and I would recommend it. Next up on the list. So first thing, I'm not going to talk about this book like at all because it was on my list for my highest rated books. I will link that video up above if you wish to watch that. But basically I'm taking the 5 books that are rated the most highly on my TBR and I'm going to read them within the next couple of months and then kind of revisit them, talk about did they live up to the hype. In all actuality, Crooked Kingdom was the highest rated on that list, but obviously I can't read Crooked Kingdom without reading Six of Crows first. So I went ahead and read Six of Crows. I will say that it lived up to the hype and I had to immediately start Crooked Kingdom after that, so I did read both of these and both of them live up to the hype. That's all I'm gonna say for right now. You'll have to watch the video whenever I revisit it to get my actual thoughts on the books. Next is the anthology that I read this month, and that is Tales from a Talking Board. It was edited by Ross E. Lockhart, and I gave this 3 stars. There were some stories in it that I really liked, and there were some stories in it that didn't really pack a punch. The very first story in this book is by Christy DeMeester, and I really like her writing. I cannot wait to get to a full-length novel by her because I just think it's going to be so good. But basically, this is a short story collection that deals around Ouija boards. And so I was really interested in that. Again, some of them were good, some of them weren't. So, you know, rounded out to about 3 stars. I've been reading this forever. I'm pretty sure I started this in October, but with short story collections, sometimes I just like, I read a story here and there, so it takes me a while to get through it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't hate it, and I did discover some new authors in this one that I hadn't heard of before that I did like their stories, so I want to look and read some of their actual. Next on the list is another book of the month book. I don't know why I read so many book of the month books this month, but I'm not mad at it because I have more on my shelf to read. But that is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. Oh boy, I loved this book. 5 stars. This is a contender for one of my favorite books of the year. This is YA, and it is about a young girl who loses her mother to suicide. And there were so many things that I loved about this book. So one of the reasons it is called The Astonishing Color of After is because Lee, who is the main character of this book, she describes everything she sees and everything she feels with color, and I loved that. I thought that it made it a lot easier to like visualize things, and you know, when we talk about different emotions and like the color that looks like, I just thought that that concept in itself was so interesting, and so I did really enjoy that. One of the other things that I did really enjoy about this book, and she talks about this in the afterword, the author does, but one of the things that they talked about during whenever discussing her mother and like her mental health problems and dealing with depression, there was not a reason for that depression. And I felt like that made it more authentic. I loved that this book is really encouraging talking about your feelings and that kind of thing, and really talking about mental health and depression, because if you talk about it and you talk about, you know, suicide, and you educate yourself and you educate the people around you, you know, that it really does help. I related to a lot of things in this book, and it felt very personal to me in a way that I wasn't expecting. When I picked this book up, I did not expect to like actually have feelings, and I wasn't expecting to actually like cry about this book at all. I was not expecting it. And I got to the end and it just like slapped me in the face, and it really touched my soul in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like I said, rated at 5 stars, absolutely loved it. There's a lot more to it than just the mental health side. You know, you have a character who is half American and half Taiwanese, and really dealing with that cultural identity aspect of it, and some of the like microaggressions that she experiences because of her mixed race. So you have a biracial main character, so that is, you know, really great. But overall, this book is just, it's so good. Like I said, contender for favorite of the year. So, and the very last book that I finished for the month is Rainbirds. This is by Clarissa Giannowan. I think that that's how you say that last name. So this book is about a young man who is dealing with the after effects of his older sister's suicide. Not suicide, murder. Of his older sister's murder, but she is violently murdered. They don't have any leads, and so he goes to the place that she was living, you know, to really kind of tie up those loose ends, and ends up teaching at the school that she was teaching at, and really getting to know the people that were in her life, all while trying to figure out who she was as a person, as they had been living apart for quite some time, as well as, you know, trying to figure out who wanted to kill her. And I enjoyed this. However, I thought that the pacing was interesting. The way that they led up to the ending and to the reveal, I didn't really care for. It was just like, oh, you know, you're kind of like, you're bebopping along and things are happening, and then all of a sudden it's like, here it is. I don't know, there wasn't really like enough build up for me. And then there wasn't, like, nothing ever came from the reveal. And so that aspect of it, I didn't like really enjoy. I'm undecided on whether or not I'm gonna unhaul this or not. It's pretty, I wanna keep it for that reason, but I just don't know if I loved it enough to keep it. Like I said, 3 stars, it was good, not great. So there you have it. Those are all 18 books that I read in the month of November. Have you read any of these books? Comment down below and let me know what you thought of them. As always, please keep it spoiler free for those that have not read it yet. You can always reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads if you want to discuss spoilers. As of this moment, I have 15 books to reach 150 books for 2018. And I'm gonna try really hard for 15 books in December, but it is December and December's busy, so we'll see if that actually happens. Once again, it's not all about the numbers, but I like the number 150, so, and it will be the most books that I've read in a year ever. So that's interesting, but okay, so that is all I have for you guys today. As always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you click thumbs up and hit subscribe if you have not already. Hopefully next time I will be in front of the bookshelf, which is over there, with all of my Christmassy decor behind it. Say goodbye to Darren, as he was a guest in this video. He's so upset because I keep bothering him, but that's okay. Anyways, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.